All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We are embarking on what is, without a doubt, one of the most mind-bending historical journeys you could possibly imagine. We're tracking the chronological voyage of the Jormungandr, a Viking longship, as it pushes way past the freezing waters of the North Atlantic and right into completely uncharted tropical territory. This isn't just your standard story about navigation. It's about a radical, literal collision of worlds. We're going to look at exactly what happens when battle-hardened Norsemen suddenly encounter sweltering heat, unimaginable wildlife, and eventually the monumental civilizations of the Deep South. It's this epic tale of survival, tactical brilliance, and unparalleled discovery. So, let's get into it.
But we don't start with some triumphant discovery. Actually, we start with an absolute nightmare. The Viking crew had just anchored in a dark bay along the densely forested coast of what we now call Florida. They were exhausted. They built a campfire, ate, and finally slept. But in the deep middle of the night, that peace was entirely shattered. A chilling, guttural war cry tore through the pitch-black silence. And then came a rain of heavy arrows. This was a full, furious ambush by the ancestors of the fearsome Calusa tribe. For the Vikings, jolted awake in a totally alien jungle, it was a sudden plunge into absolute chaos.
The crazy thing here, the Vikings were fighting totally blind. The Calusa warriors were moving with this terrifying, savage efficiency through a jungle environment they knew perfectly. The Norsemen were completely disoriented by the utter darkness. They literally couldn't even see their attackers. So what was their only option? Fall back on their legendary discipline. They were forced to just huddle up behind their shields, listening to the terrifying clash of steel on stone and the guttural shouts all around them. They had to put complete trust in their mail armor and their tight defensive formations just to survive what felt like an endless night of terror.
When the sun finally came up, the grim mouth of the night was laid bare. 24 dead. 20 of those were Calusa warriors scattered among the trees. Even fighting blind, and even after being completely ambushed, the Vikings had proven their devastating superiority in close-quarters combat. But man, that victory came at a terrible cost. 4 Vikings, Thord, Bjarni, Helften, and young Rurik, had lost their lives on this hostile shore. The emotional toll on the weary crew was immediate, and it was heavy.
But Ragnar, their leader, he wasn't about to let his men just sink into despair. Standing right there among the fallen, he let out this defiant roar. "They have tasted Norse steel. Let them remember it." They didn't just quietly bury their dead. Instead, they built a massive, roaring beachside funeral pyre. As the flames consumed their fallen brothers, the crew shouted fiercely, "To Valhalla," celebrating a glorious death in battle. It was this terrifying, fiery spectacle, totally meant to send a clear message to any native scouts watching from the tree line. Spirits, unbound, they boarded the sea serpent and pushed relentlessly south.
And that fierce departure brings us to our next chapter, Section 1, the Boundless Blue Gulf.
Okay, let's dive into this, because the sheer explosion of life they found in these warm southern waters is absolutely wild. Imagine being a Viking, right? You're used to the freezing, gray North Sea, and suddenly you are surrounded by dense, churning schools of gleaming fish that literally turn the water dark. They saw pods of dolphins gracefully leaping and herding fish with incredible intelligence. In fact, in this really beautiful moment of harmony, Ragnar ordered the nets down, and the crew actually caught their dinner right alongside the dolphins. They also saw massive, slow-moving whales spouting mist, and at night, luminous jellyfish pulsing in the water like drifting constellations. It was a daily parade of tropical wonders.
So tracking their progression week by week, things get really interesting. Week 1, they're leaving that bloody bay in the rearview mirror. By week 2, they noticed the landmass distinctly curving. They were passing the southern tip of the Florida Peninsula. They even spotted peaceful natives in canoes out hunting who barely paid the massive Viking ship any attention at all. By week 3, they were totally untethered from land, navigating the boundless gulf entirely by unfamiliar stars. And what's super fascinating here is that the intellectual of the crew, Adolf Gustavus, was watching his seemingly impossible theories about great ocean currents and a curving continent be proven absolutely true right before his eyes.
Every single day, out there on the Gulf just chipped away at everything the Vikings thought they knew about the world. Adolf had prophesied massive civilizations and immense lands, but, to the crew, that was just a theory. So after weeks of an unbroken, sweltering horizon, a cry finally rings out from the ship, "Land to the lest!" I want you to imagine the sheer suspense of that moment. What did Adolf's impossible vision actually look like when that hazy horizon finally solidified?
Which leads us to Section 2, the stone giants.
Because they weren't looking at wooden longhouses or even the crude stone churches back in Europe. No way. As they drew closer to the coast, the crew was struck into absolute breathless silence. Rising majestically from the dense green jungle were immense stepped pyramids of gleaming white and gray. They were incredibly precise, crowned with temples that seemed to literally touch the clouds. The scale of these structures dwarfed the great halls of any European king. Gerd the blacksmith, this is a guy hardened by fire and iron. He just stared at the coastline and whispered in pure awe, "By Odin's beard, is this Valhalla we see ahead?"
But Ragnar was a survivor first and foremost. His tactical genius kicked right in. You don't just sail casually up to an empire that literally builds mountains out of stone, right? So he orders a highly cautious approach. Step 1, bypass the mainland and anchor at a small isolated forested island to act as a hidden base. Step 2, armed scouting parties meticulously sweep the island to make sure it's totally deserted. Step 3, they light only a tiny, carefully concealed fire so they don't give away their position. And Step 4, they spend the night totally on edge, weapons drawn, waiting on high alert in the shadow of this bewildering new civilization.
And as dawn broke, we get to Section 3, the unveiling. Observation wasn't enough anymore. Ragnar decided they had to make contact. So he takes a small delegation, and crucially, he makes them leave their heavy armor behind. When these two totally different worlds finally stood face to face on that white sand, the contrast was just staggering. On one side, you've got the Vikings, towering height, fair hair, pale eyes, sweating in their strange wool and leather, holding their shields and axes. On the other side, the Maya, rich earth-toned skin, wearing elaborate Quetzal feather headdresses and glinting jade ornaments. They were totally unarmed, holding only ceremonial staffs. Now, the key takeaway here is that the Maya didn't see heavily armed raiders. Since they deeply valued beauty and cosmic order, they actually viewed these fair-skinned Norsemen as beautiful, otherworldly beings.
And that exact perception led to what is probably one of the most massive and, honestly, luckiest misunderstandings in history. The Maya are looking over the delegation, and their eyes lock onto Hakon. With his long, flowing white hair and beard and this deeply calm energy, they didn't just see an old guy. They saw a divine vision. Whispers started rippling through the Maya ranks, naming their revered creator gods, Idzum-na, and the feathered serpent Kukulkan. The Maya genuinely believed Hakon was a manifestation of their own deities. The Vikings, having absolutely no idea what was going on, wisely decided to just roll with this unexpected reverence, sensing it was definitely their safest path forward.
With the ice broken, we're into Section 4, Two Worlds Collide.
Stepping inside that metropolis was a complete sensory overload for the crew. They're walking down this meticulously paved causeway, past colossal pyramids scraping the sky. There are intricate stone carvings of serpents and jaguars everywhere, massive courtyards, walls totally vibrant with painted murals, all set to the constant rhythmic thumping of drums and haunting flutes. But honestly, the most mind-blowing detail? Sven the shipwright ran his hands over these perfectly fitted stone blocks and was completely baffled. The Maya had achieved this flawless, monumental precision entirely without iron tools. To a Viking craftsman, that was borderline magic.
Eventually, they're led into this grand plaza. Conall steps up and uses these kind of rudimentary hand signs to express that they'd come in peace across the great waters. The Maya spiritual leaders, who looked ancient and intense, just watched him. Then, in a deeply moving gesture of peace, an elder Maya priest walked right up to the white-bearded Hakon and gently placed this exquisitely carved, sacred jade amulet around his neck as a blessing. Just like that, peace was secured.
But the real, true connection? That actually happened a bit later, in a private courtyard, through a shared hallucinogenic ritual. It's a fascinating process. First, the Maya offered carved cups of a dark, fragrant, very earthy herbal brew. As the Vikings drank it down, rhythmic drumming and deep chanting washed over them. Pretty soon this spreading warmth took hold, at first sharpening and then blurring their senses. In this altered state, something incredible happened. That massive cultural gulf between them simply vanished. Without sharing a single spoken word, the two groups reached a profound, unspoken connection, totally understanding each other's intentions purely through shared perception.
The source material actually puts it beautifully. This was not a conquest, it was an unfolding. As the effects of the ritual faded, both sides were just completely consumed by mutual curiosity. The Maya eagerly brought out their intricate glyphs, complex star charts, and calendars. In return, the Vikings enthusiastically shared tales of their brutal, freezing voyages across the vast ocean, showing off the design of their great ship.
They were setting the stage for a deeply peaceful synthesis of two completely isolated branches of humanity.
So, Ragnar and his crew are preparing to spend 2 whole months with the Maya before making the long trek back. And man, that leaves us with such a compelling thought. Just look at what they've already shared in a few short days. So I leave you with this. When the Jormungandr finally set sail for home, what untold, world-shaking knowledge will they bring back to the old world? Thank you so much for exploring this incredible journey with me today. Keep asking questions and keep learning.